topic, such as the one I'm going to talk about, a task force is appointed. This task force is lawyers and sometimes non-lawyers with special expertise in the subject matter. And they work for a long time preparing drafts for the Standards Committee, which then finally, when it approves the draft, it goes to the Criminal Justice Section. It has to be read line by line and word for word on 2 separate readings before the Criminal Justice Section Council in order to be brought here to you. So I have the privilege today of standing here, not just to talk for myself, but to talk for the men and women who serve on these task forces, who really do the hard work that get these standards done. They don't have the privilege of coming to New Orleans or Chicago and being able to stand before you and take pride in your work. I do that on their behalf today. The standards that I bring before you today are standards relating to access to third-party records. Now, I want to be clear about something. These standards have no bearing on constitutional law. Whatever the Supreme Court and state Supreme Courts hold that the Fourth Amendment or the state variations of the Fourth Amendment, whatever they provide, of course, constitutional law trumps all other law. The purpose of these standards is to recognize that there are many records out there, and you know about them, your financial records, banking records, medical records, travel records, credit card records that contain our most private information. Most of these records do not receive constitutional protection, and most of these records at the current time do not receive statutory or regulatory protection. The purpose of these standards is to urge governmental entities that make rules, have the power to make rules regarding access to records by law enforcement, to get them to think about whether some of these records should be off limits unless law enforcement can make a certain showing. Now, the standards do not affect grand juries. The standards do not affect trials or pretrial proceedings in any criminal case. They do not affect discovery, and they do not affect national security. The standards basically are an outline, a statement to governmental bodies that you can think about private information as being highly protected information on one pole and unprotected information on the other pole, with a couple of steps in between. And the standards don't purport to tell any jurisdiction which records it should decide should be most protected or least protected. But it suggests that there are hierarchies of records and hierarchies of privacy, and that there are different processes that can be made available to, before law enforcement has an automatic right to gather records and create dossiers on citizens. Now, it may be that in this age we live in, of electronic everything, it may be in an age where so much is available on the internet, that any effort to protect privacy is like spitting in the wind, and some people believe that. Others of us believe that privacy is important, that privacy is essential, that efforts should be made to assure that not every record relating to an identifiable individual is automatically made available to law enforcement for whatever purpose they might want to make use of it. It's not intended to restrict law enforcement from making a showing that would enable it to do investigations that would in fact protect public safety. It's a balancing set of standards. It says to jurisdictions, take a look and recognize certain things that are thought to be private, ought to be private, and ought not to be accessible at the mere whim of law enforcement. These standards took 3 years to bring before you. We can never do standards in less than 3 years. And I want to thank, by the way, really thank the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and New York Bar, who had some issues in terms of understanding these standards. I want to thank them for working with us and for today not seeking to delay the adoption of these standards. I urge you to support Resolution 101A as amended, and in the process to thank those who are not here today for the very hard work they do on your behalf and our behalf and for the Criminal Justice Section. Thank you.
Mr. Salzberg. Chair has no